I am a painter, or I call myself a painter. I graduated last year from National Art School in Australia. And as just thinking about my practice, which I call the painting practice, you see that there are objects. So I'm at a stage, well, acknowledging that ever since I've been interested in painting and art, I have also simultaneously just endlessly collected things. So I'm sort of working out how those things go together. So my process, I suppose, is, and it starts with an interest in form. So in painting, I'm interested in form and how a form, often in space, might be read in certain ways, irrespective of what I come to it as in my head and what I'm thinking the form originally might be. And lately thinking about all the objects that I collect, like many people in COVID and in lockdown, looking at packaging, looking at things that appeared out a window. In the case in Sydney, it was mattresses endlessly, so I became interested in mattresses for quite a while. And since moving to Belfast at the start of this year, I just clean up the streets and collect single-use vapes and e-cigarettes. So you see the material here that's what that is. And obviously the fact that they're beautifully painted and very appealing is not an accident. That's partly, they're very, very carefully and thoughtfully designed to appeal in terms of form and shape and usability and colour and scent, all those things. So in the way that people are addicted to vapes, I'm sort of addicted to picking them up, which is something, yeah, for me to think about. When do I stop? Is this enough, or is it going to be something that I'm just going to always do? And I suppose my process is just to collect them, clean them, deconstruct them, so get pliers and screwdrivers and hammers and pull them apart. And part of my interest is the curiosity of just thinking, what is this thing, what's inside it, and how does it work? I don't know if you've ever unpicked a golf ball, but golf balls used to have an endless rubber band inside, and so I think it was stems from that interest in finding out what's inside, and then working out what the material can be separate from its context. And then going from an object like this, just sort of absorbing it through drawing and manipulating it and amalgamating it and separating it, and then thinking about painting, what happens when I paint with all this information in my head, but without being too literal. And I suppose more generally my practice is interested in contrast between, say, the stillness of an object, and in the case of these bits, all the kind of violence that's happened to them when they've been run over and squashed and hammered. And what happens in a painting when you try to capture both those oppositions, I suppose.
Thanks.
Is that good?
I'm kind of a sculptural, expanded practice, installation artist. I work with, what do I work with? I work with anything and everything. I'm mainly focused on kind of collaborations with communities and certain people within different groups and societies, and kind of emerging forms of like class dynamics that are emerging now within a kind of like a post-industrial age. And so when I first applied for this exhibition, I kind of was interested in the idea of transition. I thought that fit in perfect for what I was doing. So in this piece, for example, I had emigrated a few years ago, and normally my pieces are working with groups and people, and suddenly it's never autobiographical, but suddenly it became autobiographical because I became kind of like a member of an emergent form of a class that's all of a sudden happening or repeating again. But this became when I emigrated about 2 years ago, I was kind of spending time in the outside of Ireland and working outside of Ireland, and as you do, as you walk, well I do, I kind of walk a lot, so I was building up kind of what do you say, hardened skin, callous skin, from walking, from working on my feet particularly. And so I thought it was interesting that I was walking through streets that are not in Ireland, and yet I'm Irish, and so by kind of removing that skin and reimagining the skin in the shape of the landmass, it becomes kind of like the one place that I'm not walking on. So that was that piece, and it's kind of like that transition between, or that repeated transition between the people that are here and are leaving, and then hopefully returning maybe. but yeah, so that's kind of like the work I make. But again, it's kind of, with my work, it depends. Any material can be used and reused. So yeah, so that's my practice.
Thank you.
Kelly. I suppose the work that I make and have made for a number of years now, it is exploring the idea of resilience. And very often I suppose the triggers or the links and resonances and inspirations come from many sources. A lot of it's driven by personal experience, but I also get a lot of inspiration from things like sport and medicine. So all the works that are here, and I was really shocked when Robert said you were selecting all of them, so I thought, well, then maybe pick one if they pick any. And but they're all from a body of work, a larger body of work that was made last year, so 2022, working with women boxers in North Dublin. And the idea of the project was to kind of explore the parallels between art and sport, but also this idea of resilience and risk and doubt, which overlap, I think, with artistic practice. And this particular piece, I'll just chat a wee bit about the making of it. So this piece and the two scrim punch bags were made in collaboration with the women boxers. So what happened, I was interested in the idea of transference of energy. I mean, I was bowled away. I was just saying to Alison about stepping into the boxing gym and just being blown away by the sheer energy and the sound, like the whole floor was vibrating. It was absolutely electric. And I know nothing about, I'm interested in sport. I do run, and I've worked with runners, but I have no knowledge, no experience of anything connected to boxing. And so what I suggested was that the women boxers dipped their boxing gloves into black paint, and we had wrapped their training punch bags with the scrim, this material here, and laid this artist canvas piece, not obviously with the drawing on, but on the floor, just to protect their own gym. And then I was interested in the residue and the marks. And the other interesting thing, particularly with the black paint, and I was interested in the contrast between this idea of toughness and force, and the idea of how we might perceive women as a kind of a kind of weaker entity, traditionally, and so that kind of softness and hardness, I was interested in the contrast and the idea of exploring that. So if you know anything about printmaking, you may know that scrim is used to clean plates, clean ink from plates. And the scrim material starts quite stiff, but the more you handle it, the softer it will get. But the more ink it collects, the stiffer and denser and so on it becomes. So I was kind of interested in that, and I like the idea of the scrim being a kind of working connotation, and then I, stitched the segments together and suspended them using the embroidery hoops, which have, traditionally been associated with women's kind of practice and so on. So the piece over here, these are the boxers' footprints that were, because obviously paint went everywhere, charcoal went everywhere. So I was kind of interested. I didn't plan any of these pieces. It was just, a process of watching, observing, taking in, interviewing, talking with them, and a lot of contemplation around, what I'd encountered. So I decided to actually use this, protected or protection sheet or canvas as a piece in itself, and added the drawing of the ring lips and so on, and stitched the boxer's hand wraps. So these are the girls' boxer hand wraps. And finally, the red torso. It relates very strongly to a body of work that has been kind of ongoing for me around the body and resilience, illness, recovery, and transformation. And so this piece, draws on that sport reference with the compression bandage, but also on a medical sort of reference as well, like that kind of idea of protecting the body or supporting it or bracing, and so on. Because inside are stuffed rags, and it's kind of has a papier-mâché body that has been stuffed with rags and what have you. I think what interests me in particular as well is this kind of link with art and with drawing in particular. And I was reading something recently where Edgar Degas had described art as a battle, and actually you go to battle with yourself. But actually, it's interesting because every time you make new work is a challenge. And I always want to try and push things. So in terms of that idea about pushing boundaries, taking a risk, just putting yourself in it and out there and doing it, to me has a resonance, with the training of boxers. And the idea of persistence and resilience of building something up over time is really important. So, my hope is it kind of spoke around, physical resilience and also the mental resilience that we all need.
Thank you, Sharon.
Talk sort of links very nicely into this, because this piece is a sort of transition for me. I just sort of finished quite a large body of work, and I've been sort of embarking on what could possibly be the next thing, and it's taken me some time to kind of sort of work that out. I'm not there yet. But this piece, at the start of this year, I went and did a course with an artist called Joanne Kessel, and she does these micro mosaics. So the process of micro mosaics is that you sit at a flame and you pull out stringers of glass, so threads of glass essentially, and you cut them up and you embed them in grout. So it's quite small, tiny work, quite fiddly. And this is my sort of interpretation of that process. I got a residency this year to True Guthrie, so I spent a week fiddling around, driving myself sort of slightly mad, putting all these tiny pieces of glass into this piece of wood. The piece of wood I found on a walk with my dog, and I'd seen it for ages, but every so often I'd sort of go over and give it a tug, because it was just, there's something very bone-like about it for me, something very organic. It was just very appealing shape. And so eventually I did actually lift this piece of wood, so I brought it with me to True Guthrie and worked on that down there, drew it and documented things like that. So I believe the piece of wood is a piece of hawthorn, and of course, in Irish folklore, the hawthorn tree has so many associations, protection and healing powers. Obviously, it also has a lone hawthorn could also be a fairy tree, And once I brought this piece of wood back to my studio, started reading up on how you absolutely cannot touch pieces of fairytry and you would die instantly, like etc. So really hoping that this is not a piece of fairytry. What do you think? So that got me thinking kind of about healing. And at Dublin Guthrie there is a kind of a fairy fort, sort of ring of trees, and in this ring of trees there are some rags hung, and of course it was a pagan tradition, you know, this idea of sort of hanging a rag, and as this rag rots away, your ailment should be cured or healed. So this was sort of looking at this whole idea of healing, whether it's in a physical sense or in an emotional or psychological sense. So I'm quite interested in maybe continuing this work further.
Thank you.
Was actually shown in my degree show in Edinburgh, so I'm really happy to be able to show it in Northern Ireland and actually in Lisburn, because this is where I was born and grew up. So a bit about my practice in general is that my work is mostly focused on like relationships between humans, like connections and exchanges between humans and the more than human world. Probably since the pandemic, it's been focusing on like actions and gestures that seem insignificant or often overlooked. So this piece here was actually, it was from an audio recording of my cat running across the piano that I had on my phone. At the time, I'd been making quite a lot of ephemeral sculptures, like maybe things that just existed for a moment, like kind of ice boat or whatever, like paper kite or whatever it may be. And I was thinking about actually kind of reversing that and making an event into an object. And that recording just really felt like quite poignant to me. It felt like it kind of captured this like moment of like, I don't know, like where a cat kind of crosses that boundary between wild and domestic. So it really kind of, I felt like, right, okay, that's the gesture that I'm going to go for here, and ended up making this mad music box. Quite interested in the process of like translation itself, and how elements would just like inevitably become changed or lost in that process, like from the event itself to a digital recording to a musical score of a non-musical kind of, you know, thing, to then like changing that into a piece to be played on a xylophone. So there's like lots of octaves there. You know, there's like no time signature, all the rest of it, and also just like, I think more kind of importantly, that overall like my misunderstanding of my little cat's gesture. So the choice of materials it was literally just what I had lying around. So I had plywood, this drum here needed to be made from hardwood, and I was actually at home at the time, so it was during the summer just before my final year of university, and my granda had a half of an old mahogany wood door lying around. He was like, well, you could use this. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll use that, and it looks pretty nice, so that's worked out. These things here were just made from cocktail sticks and beads, and I think for me it's like quite important to like foreground the handmadeness of it all, and for it to kind of feel like quite domestic in a way, like so yeah. The wheelbarrow aspect of it came a bit later. I put it to one side and thought, right, okay, this is a strange object I've made. I'm not quite sure I'm done yet. Like, I'm still kind of like getting some feedback here. I'm kind of still thinking it through myself. Just trying it out, you know, like, right, maybe I could put up a tree. Maybe I could do all these things that would like refer back to the the little composer himself, or like maybe it's actually moved further away from that and it doesn't actually need to refer back to the original kind of event. And I was thinking back to previous things I'd made, and I had actually made like these flat pack sculptures and had sent them to people during the pandemic, and like had little collaborations where I was quite interested in the context informing the work, kind of moving beyond like the white cube space and like having it outside, and like how that kind of informed the work. So I thought, oh, I'll just make a wee trolley, you know. I don't actually really like that this is so static. It's kind of disturbing me slightly, and I'll make a wee trolley, I'll do that. And at the same time I was reading this book called Dominance and Affection, and it's about like the kind of conceptual links between owning a pet and having a garden, and like the history of like, you know, people controlling how plants would be, like hybrid plants and all the rest of it, and aesthetics, and also like breeding pets to look a certain way. And the things that I was making was slightly looking like a wheelbarrow, so it kind of turned into that, and this is it. So it's like, it's existed in a few different ways since, like there's been performances and film pieces, and in my degree show it was shown like this with another work that kind of relates to it called Cat Ladder, with a sound piece. So I feel like it's still kind of like like making an artwork is like a process of kind of transition in itself, and I mean, you know, it's, you just kind of decide when that ends. But yeah, so that's kind of it.
Thank you.
Last year with a degree in textile art design and fashion, and I'm currently based back at the Art College this year as an artist in resident. My degree work was largely centred around using Indigenous Irish materials and exploring how I could create flat textiles that would self-fold and become three-dimensional. Since graduating, I received an award from the Design Craft Council Ireland, which allowed me to purchase new materials, and I was able to get this linen fibre that was spun in Mackey's in Ulster. So it was the first time that I was working with linen that actually was connected to Ireland, because previously my linen was imported from Belgium, so it was an Irish material, something that is indigenous to this island but was no longer available to purchase here. I'm still interested in the idea of creating something flat that becomes three-dimensional, so these are all knit flat but with the shaping that allows them to then become 3D. So it's one continuous fibre, knits the whole thing from start to finish. The idea of transition comes into them because obviously whenever I knit them, although linen is quite a coarse fibre, they're obviously soft spaces, and so I inflate and deflate them a couple of times, and I use kind of a bio glue made from cornstarch, and obviously starching has a connection to linen as well. So yeah.
Thank you, Maya.
Thank you.